First off, I want to apologize. I'm using a dynamic microphone this time. I just wanted to see if the sound quality was any different, because I tend to whisper when I talk, and dynamic mic should fix that. Hello, Trigun enthusiasts. I know I'm like a month late to the party, and I finished the show maybe about a month ago, but at the very least, what I can promise you is that there will not be any recency bias. So about 2 months ago, I put out the call for you guys to give me a new anime to watch, because I can't make decisions for myself. I gave you guys a certain criteria to follow, like it had to be between 7.5 and an 8.5 score on MAL, it had to be less than 50 episodes, etc. Just manageable for me to watch. And luckily, y'all didn't disappoint. You gave me quite a number of options, some of them actually not fitting with the criteria, but at the end of the day, we did settle on Trigun. That was a suggestion by Rusty Raider, so bravo, man. You also put in like a whole bunch of other options like Cowboy Bebop and Outlaw Star and Space Dandy, which cheating, but you know what? That's something I'll sand out for the next time I ask for a recommendation. The point is, Trigun. We're doing it now. So if you're unfamiliar with the way that I rate these shows, I rate it by something that I created called the MAHFF Index, which is something that measures music, animation, humor, fan service, and feels. Tried to hold in a burp. That was my mistake. I had mochi earlier, and that might have a stain or two on my shirt, but beside the point. I know I usually save the real-world information for later, but I'm just going to do it first like everybody else, because it's just a lot easier that way. Trigun was initially written by a man named Yasuhiro Naito, who was a mangaka with one of the coolest non-Japanese last names that I have ever heard from a Japanese-born mangaka, and he is also responsible for writing Blood Blockade Battlefront, which is a show that I happen to like, so already starting off good. It was first serialized in Shonen Manga Magazine until it was eventually picked up by TV Tokyo, who wanted Madhouse to animate the animated series back in 1998, which is the anime that I am going to be talking about. I specify that because in 2023 we got the release of Trigun Stampede, which is a reboot for the series done entirely in CG, which, credit where credit's due, the CG animation looks revolutionary, it looks great, but I gave episode 1 a shot, and I did not like it because I saw that you replaced Millie, and I do not appreciate that because Millie is really sweet, and it makes me angry that you would do something so heinous to the series as to get rid of her. I also don't like what they did with Ash's character design because you took a really iconic looking red coat and spiky hair and turned him into an e-boy. An e-boy. Anyway, back to the original show. So Trigun 1998 is a space western, so it's a sci-fi that takes place far in our future on a planet that is very far away from us, called No Man's Land. The story follows an outlaw who has a $60 billion double dollar bounty on his head, which, I don't know, double dollar is just a really funny way of putting it. Like, I haven't heard currency that funny since the ruble, but I digress. This is a man who is reputed to be able to wipe out cities with the sling of his gun, so very obviously he is probably the most wanted man on the planet. And with a bounty that high, you have a couple of vagrants that are going to try hunting him. In walks two of our other main characters that we will be following for the duration of the show, named Millie and Meryl. These two are adorable. They're also like the most real people in this whole show. I've seen comments about this where all the other characters are kind of just going through the motions and living out their respective environments. Meanwhile, Millie and Meryl are kind of just the anchors that are the most like people, or at least they're the most like the viewers that are watching it. And I definitely agree with that. They're kind of just along for the ride. But the thing about them is that they are after the man with the big bounty on his head, but not for the reason you think. Because these girls are insurance girls that also happen to be swinging or packing some serious heat. Now, in this case, what they are after is to find this man, this human typhoon with the ability to wipe out cities, and to negotiate with him to not do that. So they're there to act as like damage control, and also to try to curb this man's damage as best as they can. This brings us to the MAHFF Index. So in regards to the music, I give it about a 7 out of 10. It's not something that I'd go out of my way to listen to, unfortunately. Now, the opening sequence, really good. That is a sequence that is done by a man named Tsuneo Imahori. I hope that I pronounced that right. But he is a Japanese music composer that is responsible for the opening and the ending sequence of the show and all the music in between. Now, the ending, not a fan of. I don't really want to go back to listen to that. But the opening, it is a cowboy bebop style opening where they don't have any lyrics to it. It's just guitar riffs for the most part. And it fits the setting really well. And I see a lot of comments on Mal saying the same thing, where the music in the setting mesh together like peanut butter and jelly. It's a really good piece of music for the setting that it is presenting. But like I said, this isn't music that I would listen to. It's just not my taste. I'm more of a creepy nuts, Asian Kung Fu generation, man with a mission kind of guy. So, whereas I don't like it, you probably do. And I recognize that it's some good music for the show, so 7 out of 10. So as I mentioned before, the animation of this show was done by MAHFF. Like, this was before they did Hajime no Ippo, I believe, in 2000, which, fun fact, I'm actually watching that right now. But the animation is okay. I don't want to call it lazy outright, but a lot of the action, or not all of it, but a fair amount of it, can be summed up as a picture of guys looking like they're getting shot, panning from left to right. So, panning from left to right with some music going on in the background of gunshots and people groaning. And then there are sequences where characters are actually shooting guns, where it's them with their hair flowing around in the wind, sideways, while their gun is panning in front of them. It's good camera work. There are some parts of the show that are animated really well, so like the opening sequence is a good example. Whenever the action goes off, it goes hard. There are sequences in the show where it's clear Madhouse must have given their animators at least an extra 2 hours of sleep, because they put in the work, and it does look really good. But for action sequences where characters are just not really moving and it's just camera work, it can get a little tiring at times, and it's just not as much of a spectacle as it could be. It could be better. So all in all, animation wasn't too bad, so I'll give you your 6 out of 10 because of your animated sequences, and for any time somebody whips out a gun and their capes go flying. Those are really cool scenes. So for humor, I will give you a 7 out of 10 solely based on your reaction faces. Trigun's got some pretty good moments where the Madhouse animators have fun with it. I still think back to a wild image of Vash balancing a basketball on his tongue, which, like, he looks like a Egyptian hieroglyph. He looks like something that the Aztecs would have tried to make a statue of. But other than those, there isn't really a moment where I was busting a gut laughing, or at least not something that I could recall. The best joke that I could think of was back in episode 1 when they're introducing Vash, and he looks competent, he looks like a scary dude, only for him to be incompetent, and it doesn't look like he knows what he's doing, and he's just lucky to be alive. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Like, you're still leagues away from Dr. Stone, but, you know, still amusing. So, 7 out of 10. Fan service, 3 out of 10. This is just not the show for it. Like, there are moments, I will say, I can count them all on one hand. The only moments that I could think of that were fan service worthy in Trigun 1998 were a scene where Vash is getting catcalled by a couple of girls running a brothel after he just walked into town, and when Vash is fighting one of the gung-ho guns who are trying to kill him, and he's trying to prove how fast he is by grabbing the shirt buttons, and her shirt just poofs open. Now, to his credit, that girl did the same thing to him to try to prove how fast she was by snagging one button off his collar. So he just one-upped her and like grabbed 5 of them, which ended up doing that. At the very least, like, he wasn't being a perv, he was just trying to show how fast he was, and it was nice to see some fan service in a show that seemed pretty devoid and dry of it. And there aren't really any scenes that make my heart squeeze either out of cuteness or just sheer awe moments, so 3 out of 10 sounds just about right. Feels, I will give you a crisp 7 out of 10, and mostly because of what happens in the second half of the story when you're diving into Vash's backstory, and also because you added in a second character named Wolfwood. Now, Wolfwood, super cool. He's probably the coolest priest that I've seen in anime. Eat it, Kirei Kotomine. He and Wolfwood have really good chemistry with each other, and they seem like genuinely good friends. And also, I think their colors really complement each other, and their skills are just... They're fun to watch. Like, they're fun to watch bash at each other. They're fun to watch fight. This dude carries around a giant cross that turns into a freaking gun, which is Oh, it's just so good. Like, the technology in this show, man, you just have to watch it. You just have to be there to see it unfold, or at least look up a couple of scenes. But damn, Wolfwood, what a guy. But anyway, yeah, the feelings really come from Vash struggling with his inner conflict of killing people, because, like I said, he's very naive to that belief where he will not kill anybody regardless of what's going on. Like, he will probably sacrifice many a people to keep that belief. And I use that with an asterisk because he doesn't want anybody to die, but he's not willing to kill anybody to protect everybody. And the big bad guy at the end of it all really wants to challenge Vash's beliefs to see if he could actually get him that far to actually kill somebody. And it's a tough struggle. They put him through the ringer as far as moral dilemmas are concerned, and the insurance girls are there for it all. Like, the insurance girls are essentially our perspective looking at the story unfold, and they're doing it as if they're keeping a record of his actions, and they also get caught in the crossfire, which really affects Vash in a negative way. And it all comes together in a pretty good climax. Now, at least I think that it's a good climax, because a lot of people tend to have an issue with it, and they don't really have a good explanation as to how it ends. In my opinion, it's one of those conclusions where the main character knows that they have to end things a certain way, or at least they're being told that they can't end it any other way. They have to follow a specific path. But the main character finds a new way to do it, or at least they find a way that works best for everybody, including them. So the best example that I could think of, and it's really hard to tiptoe around this because I don't want to spoil the ending for anybody, but to compare it to another show, Avatar: The Last Airbender. So in that show, Aang has to try to defeat the Fire Lord a certain way, or at least everybody's telling him he has to do it this way. But that completely goes against his principles. Like, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to end a life. So in this case, Aang finds a different way to go about it. He finds a way that ends up being best for everybody, including himself. And Vash goes through a similar development where he has to try to find a way to end things in a way that's best for him. And that climax, I think, was done pretty good. And especially with Vash, I very much liked how when he hit rock bottom, it was up to his friends and the people he was traveling with to get him back up, to show him the direction that he's looking for. And it's those friends that, despite initially being at each other's throats, they're the ones that start acting more like him. Like, they're the ones that adopt his no-killing policy to great effect, and that eventually gives Vash the will to continue, like the will to finally fight the big bad at the end of the series. And the conclusion that he comes to, without spoiling anything, is perseverance. And that's really what the end of the show means to me. Just how, despite how poorly things have gone, as long as you're sticking to it, as long as you're willing to hold out for just a little bit longer, you might just find the answer that you're looking for. And in this case, Vash was able to find it. That sounds so cliche, and it would be a lot better if I could spoil some things for you to make my point, to really get my point across. Maybe for the next show that I do, I'll just completely rip off the Band-Aid and not care about it whatsoever. But in this case, that's what I got to say about Trigun. It was a fairly decent show. I think I gave it a 7 out of 10 on Mal. It wasn't perfect, and, you know, it doesn't need to be perfect, but like, if I were to have any gripes with it, I'd say that the world building could have used some work, because especially when it came to how these cities function with their fuel cells, they allude to the idea that these fuel cells are run by living creature, like otherworldly creatures that are inside these giant light bulbs that are trying to fuel these cities, and they don't really explore much into it. And then some things just happen that weren't really built up to. Like, there's an arc where Vash has to go home, so to speak. And home is this giant city in the sky, like a still working spaceship that's orbiting this planet. And that wasn't set up. It was initially just believed that there wasn't anybody else except for the people that were on the ground, but I guess we have sky people now. So build-up could have been a little bit better. But that said, it's a pretty coherent story, and it really fits the whole space western category. If it weren't for Cowboy Bebop literally coming out in the same year, I'm sure that the show probably would have done a lot better. But I'm sure Trigun didn't ask to go up against the space western anime. So it's hardly their fault. When it comes to the best girl in Trigun, it's obviously Millie. So Millie, to give you a real brief character summary, she's just a really nice girl who is super strong, and that comedy is actually paid to pretty good effect. You know, that's actually another thing that goes into humor, because she looks like this this frail woman who you don't know is like literally packing a minigun underneath that thick layer of clothing. She is strong as they come, and she's also just super sweet. And she and Wolfwood, I think, have a thing going on later on in the show, and a scene happens. If you've seen the show, you'll know what I'm talking about. But like, wow, really? I didn't think that you'd be willing to go that route, but you know what? Trigun ain't made for kids. It's made as an art form for everybody, I'll say. And boy howdy, I guess they're really playing into a whole new demographic there. Overall, it's not a show that I would recommend to people just outright, unless I really knew the person and I knew they liked this specific kind of genre, then I'd recommend it. But for what it's worth, I'm glad that it was recommended to me, and I'm glad that I saw it, because I actually finished a classic, and I can say that I did. It's a contained story that actually had an ending to it, and that's all I could really ask for when I watch a new show. It was fulfilling. So, thanks again to Rusty Raider for having suggested it, along with everybody else who gave me suggestions. I will ask for another show at some point. I want to hold off on it because it's spooky season. I want to try to get a couple of Monster Girl videos out, at least as many as I can try to muster. And just because they made up score like the MAHFF Index gave it a bad score doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad show, because there's just plenty of things that the MAHFF Index just completely ignores, like character and setting and junk. So it is what it is. If you like Trigun, yell at me in the comments. Tell me why I'm wrong. So to keep with the message of perseverance, I'm just going to keep doing it this way because that's the way I want to do it. Thanks, Trigun. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Sayonara, suckers.